Welcome to a special edition of Cohasset Common. I'm Town Manager Chris Sr., and I'm here today to talk about the special town meeting warrant, December 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Right here, we're filming here in the high school. All of you should have received at home a copy of the warrant by mail. It looks like this. Right, so don't think it's junk mail. It's actually really important. Take a look at it. It'll be on the website too if you want an electronic copy. And in it are 15 articles that are going to be considered by the town meeting. Today, we're going to go over them with our guest today, Rob Hillman, the chair of the town's advisory committee, which looks at the entire warrant and it opines on all the articles, and Jennifer Mullins, town's new finance director and town accountant. Welcome to Cohasset.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
So for Rob, this is old hat. He's been doing this for a while. So, but for Jennifer, this is new. So, but again, and we'll start. The very first article on the warrant this year is amendments to the budget, and it's only one, and that's simply, Jennifer, I understand, to move money that we get for 143 TV, which is what we're filming on today, to 143 TV.
Yes, no, thank you. This is relatively new to government from the Department of Revenue. We'll be doing it in the last couple of years, and you'll see this moving forward. When we receive money from Verizon, it goes into a special account, which is called a Receipts Reserved for Appropriation account. We cannot spend out of that account unless we have a town meeting vote, and then that money goes to Cohasset 143 TV per the contract. So that's what this article will do.
Yeah, it's the money from Verizon and Comcast that we get, and we do it twice a year.
Yes.
So, all right, awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer. That's Article 1, and it's been recommended unanimously by the Select Board and the Advisory Committee. Article 2 is something that we always have on the warrant. We don't always have bills to pay, but unfortunately this year we do have a couple, and it's unpaid bills for prior years. These are all bills, Jennifer, that have been vetted.
Yes.
And again, the way it works for the community is that if a bill isn't paid or money set aside by June 30th, you have to have a special action by town meeting to pay them, and these have all been validated.
That is correct. In municipal government, we are on a cash basis, so if we receive bills from a prior fiscal year without any encumbrances or from a special article, then we are required to go to town meeting to fund those bills.
And this is kind of a mixed bag, and after having reviewed them pretty intensely, these really come under the category of vendor changes, and we had a number of staff changes, Jennifer being one of them. Yeah. So. And some things I think just kind of slipped a little, which is unfortunate. That said, none of them are large in and of themselves, but the services were all provided, and we need to pay them. And both Select Board and Advisory Committee recommended unanimously. Any more?
Oh, it was no trouble. I mean, there are services or materials that we received, and we should pay for them.
So there we go. So again, Select Board and Advisory Committee both voted unanimously to recommend Article 2. Article 3, bigger numbers in this one, and these are funds that are going to the stabilization accounts. Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
Absolutely. So the town of Cohasset has a few stabilization accounts. A stabilization fund is set up by town meeting, and it's really a trust fund, which lets the town invest the money for the longer term. So we get a bigger market value, where a lot of our other investments has to be kept in cash and liquid within 3 months. The stabilization can be invested long term for a year or longer. So we end up, according to our policies, we do appropriate a certain amount of money into those stabilization funds or savings accounts for that specific purpose. And so as part of the fiscal policies, you will see 3 line items that we're taking some free cash and we're transferring it into those trust and stabilization funds.
Okay. One is for the OPEB trust fund, and that's following a policy that was adopted by the PEB committee, validated by the advisory committee and the select board, and this is the regular contribution that comes in the fall. There's also one that comes in the annual budget that was adopted back in May. The second is to put money into capital stabilization. You'll see in a minute we'll be actually taking money back out of capital stabilization. But this puts money in. These are for long-term capital projects, so we can actually pay for them with cash rather than to bond. And then the other is the Special Ed Stabilization Fund, and that is put into place to help smooth out costs. Sometimes special education costs can be unexpected, and the budget's fixed. So this allows for the school committee to seek funding, and the select board then validates that. And that's happened actually twice in the last 2 years. And this puts money back into it. So
it might be useful for listeners, and who knows, maybe even me, if you could define, when we use the term free cash, what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So free cash is basically a town surplus at the end of the fiscal year. So where does free cash come from? Free cash is your unspent budget fund. So every year in May, you go to town meeting and you vote a budget. What we haven't spent when we close out the budget reverts to, we call it return to revenue. And also your actual receipts that came in over your estimated receipts will revert, and that really is a part of your free cash.
And the town's policy is 3 to 4%, which is about $1.5 million a year plus. And that's the target we hit. And this year we most certainly reach that number. So
Yes, so the DOR goes over our financial statements after we've closed out the year and certifies what our surplus is, what our free cash is. And this year it was a little over 2.5 million.
Okay. So that's Article 3, Stabilization Funds. Both, again, recommended unanimously by the Select Board and the Advisory Committee. Article 4 is Allocation of Funds for One-Time Costs. These are a series of small projects that have specific expenses that happen once. They're not recurring. So we don't hire, this is not for like the hiring of new staff or anything like that. And in this is a series of small, there's 9 of them in here. You can see them all. There'll be more information on the town's website. There's a removal of a compost pile, a long time coming. The DPW needs to reorganize that. During the pandemic, it kind of flowed up a little bit more than they wanted, and they have to get it trucked out to a composting facility, and then we're going to reset how we do it. CRM is a customer relations management platform, which everyone will hear more about in the new year. It's a way to improve our accessibility to residents for questions and concerns, whether it's potholes or trees or just questions. So that'll be something we're looking to. It's a small expense. Revaluation certification, that's for the assessors. Every 3 to 5 years, they have to do a specialized revaluation. In this case, it's commercial industrial properties and things like that. We don't have expertise inside, and rather than put it into the budget, because it's not a permanent cost, it only happens sporadically. It's in here, so it gets done and then it gets spent. Some playground repairs, we're going to start building this into the budget of facilities going forward. The facilities department will take on regular playground responsibilities, and this is going to bridge that gap. This is for small things that may break in a playground during the year, not a big rebuild, just small stuff. Crack sealing of the tennis courts, something that's kind of important, so we can keep using them pending a bigger conversation that's going on about fields and courts, which will take place at annual town meeting in the spring. A field rake, sounds kind of obscure, that helps kind of help maintain the fields, particularly the baseball fields at Beechwood and Milliken. It's a piece of equipment that's hard to find. It doesn't rent easily, and it's going to allow us to do a better job of maintaining that fields, I should say. Wetlands engineering, we need to do some research of wetlands and wheelwright. It's all part of an article coming up, which we'll talk about in a second, about trying to site a new cell tower to improve cell service on the north side of town, which is really problematic, and from a public safety point of view, much less just a regular day-to-day point of view. We've settled the number of contracts. This is just a bridge amount to help us get through that. Some of them went over 2 years because we didn't have a settlement until this year for last year. So this just helps smooth that out. And OWL. The OWL, for any member of the public who hasn't seen them, it's a device that's used to do a hybrid meeting. It has, it looks, it's about this big, and has a little camera that internally you can't see it move. And it has a sound system. And for a small room, like the room that we're in here, you can put that on a table and it'll allow for the broadcast of a meeting. The trustees of the library use it, the Elder Affairs uses it, and what it allows for is to have a hybrid meeting. You can have the meeting recorded and projected to Zoom and TV, and also allow people to participate remotely. So we found that they're in great need. That seems to be the world we're going into, is more of that. So this will allow for more of these modest-sized meetings to take place, and they're about $1,300 a piece, since the $4,000. So that'll allow us to have, we'll have 5 of them then, and there's a growing demand for these kinds of hybrid meetings. So this will allow us to do more of that.
I think it's worth adding that the largest item on this list, by basically in order of magnitude, is the funding relating to, you referred to contracts, so the collective bargaining agreements between the town and its various unions, which I understand you settled all of them.
All 6 of them have now been settled, yes.
Right,
They
which
were
is-
not when we were doing the budget last year.
Right, and yeah, I think it's important, that's a big benchmark. And both the school committee settled its contract, and as did the town. You know, our employees are the majority of our budget, and they're the people who provide town services, so it's important to settle those contracts. And because some of them poured over into other years, this is to fund portions of them, so it's important to do so. The advisory committee was both pleased to hear that all the contracts have been resolved and pleased to be able to fund them up appropriately, so that was good.
Okay. And this whole article, the advisory recommended unanimously to nothing, and the select board 5 to nothing.
Yeah, we got presentations, you know, more in depth, but on all of them, all our questions were answered. It was all good.
In fact, I should remind everyone viewing this at home, if you really want to watch any of these meetings, they're all on the YouTube site, so you can watch the advisory committee deliberate on all of these topics. So anyone who wants to learn more, feel free to go and take a look at the advisory committee's piece, all the recordings, or the select board for that matter, or the capital budget committee, which we're coming up to now. So
I've looked at the YouTube statistic, and ones of citizens have looked in on us, so.
So it's there.
It's there. It's
Scintillating viewing. So all the meetings are recorded, so you can watch any of the meetings of advisory or capital or select board or school committee and others. The capital budget. So we don't do a lot in the fall, but all the ones that are on here have a variety of either important timeliness. There's a time nature to this. And in fact, there's going to be one that's likely to be added, which I'll mention as we go through this, be project number 13. And that involves the water main break that took place. I think everyone is aware of the break that took place in the village. And it's going to cost $150,000. Now, the good news is that retained earnings, which is the enterprise fund equivalent of free cash, is certified. I think the water department has somewhere north of $1 million.
It's about a little more than 1.4 million.
So they have plenty of money, but in order to take that out, the town meeting needs to act on that too. So that'll be an article, that'll be an add-on to the capital improvements. And again, the money's already there. It's just a matter of, rather than pulling out of their emergency repair line and basically bottoming it out with 6 months to go in the year, it'll allow it to be funded and just in case something else happens. No one expected this to happen. And since we have the town meeting ability, we'll be able to fund it. And this happened since the warrant was produced. So there's 12 projects. I won't go into great depth. The first one, the town was able to lease electric vehicles and pay for them 100% with a grant. The lease is up. While we might be able to get a grant to lease them more, there's no vehicles to lease.
That's the problem.
We actually have a buyout of all the vehicles. So this will allow for the they're Leafs, they're electric Leafs. They have a couple 100-mile range, and they're in use all the time. Facilities uses it, town staff uses it, Elder Affairs uses it. So the vehicles are in use all the time. They're green, and they also cut the town's mileage expense. So we have to pay people mileage if they're using an official vehicle. So the 3 vehicles the leases will be bought out. And again, there was a big conversation about that at advisory. It's cost effective, and we think we can we've maintained them well. They're 3 years old. We think we can keep another 3 years. Whether we keep beyond that, we'll see, but they're all maintained. They're all Nissans. They're maintained locally at a Nissan dealer, so
Which
we're in
is
good shape.
competitive with the cost of new leases. It's probably better than the
It
cost
is,
of new
and
leases.
the other reality is we can't get lease cars. There's nothing
Yeah,
to lease.
yeah,
Right? So,
exactly.
we're not paying above market value for a lease. We can't do that. So it's a cost-effective way of managing this, and also just a resource way. The police radio. So this was going to come in the spring. However, Bill Quigley, Chief Quigley, was able to win a grant. So this is the town's match, which will accelerate replacement police radio. So this is money well spent. The vestibule at Osgood School is a plan to remodel it for a variety of reasons. And I think the recommendations will come at town meeting, but I think it's been pretty well vetted. I know it says recommendation at town meeting. I think it was just to get more details. I don't think it was a question so much of the value of the project. There was just some details. So that should all be wrapped by the time everyone gets a town meeting floor. Police interview cameras. We have an interview room for people who are either under arrest or under review. The system has to be replaced. All those have to be recorded, so we need a new system. There's a need for a new generator at the public safety building. It's old, and that's one building that cannot ever go down and lose power. It's not a good idea. Did you want to say something?
No, that one was easy, I guess.
A completion of some HVAC upgrades up at the DPW building. This is just a final piece that'll allow that work to be completed. This will do heating and ventilation in some of the office space that's up on Cedar. The Beechwood water main. This is a project that's coming up in the new year, and this covers a little bit of a gap. When the bids went out, we came a little short. Supply chain, the realities of the world. Otherwise, the project's been fully funded by town meeting already. This is just the filler, and that's coming out of the Stabilization Fund. Water keeps the capital Stabilization Fund. The town hall elevator, anyone who's been in town hall knows the elevator broke. We were very concerned that there may have been environmental contamination. It's been out for months. The good news is that the environmental contamination was contained, so there was no real remediation other than cleaning out what was already there. Didn't pollute the soils, and the elevator itself can be replaced. So this will fully fund the work that's already been done, which is the remediation and the taking it out of service. And this will complete putting it back into service. This will put a new jack. The elevator's on a big piston. It's not on pulleys, so it's a little different than most people think. And this will finish that repair work and allow the elevator to be put back into use.
Yeah, that of all of these is one of the items that the advisory committee sort of had the most concern about. And I think probably folks who are going to attend town meeting may wonder, well, why would we put $100,000 into an elevator in a building that we propose to substantially renovate? And I think it's clear that this renovated elevator will not be a feature of a renovated town hall. There's no way to kind of cycle it in. But there are disabilities access issues that can't be accommodated to the point where we would like to accommodate them, and the time frame is long. And I think the town dodged a bullet that all those various, the hydraulic fluids didn't create a much bigger problem. So this was after a fair amount of discussion and our questions being answered, was something that we were comfortable supporting.
I think people should understand that the $65,000 has already been spent, and that was done for the remediation and the decommissioning of the elevator. That had to be done no matter what. So to put it back into service is only another $30,000 or $35,000. So that seemed to be money that's, again, well spent at this point. And again, as Rob points out, it's a necessary feature. There's a lot of people who need to use that to go up and down, whether they're coming to pay their taxes or even just visiting the assessor or whatever. This will reimburse the reserve fund for the money that was already spent. So that was done months ago, because we had to know what the problem was. You couldn't watch the tape.
Yeah.
The electric school bus. So there's a pilot program to do an electric school bus for Cohasset, which is very exciting. This will fund the small gap. Otherwise, it's pretty much fully funded. The school committee's voted for it. Alternative Energy found it. Our folks in my office bid it. It's exciting. It's going to be a pilot. And we'll see if it really works. This could be the wave of the future. Now, there's more infrastructure that would have to be built in the long term to have more than one bus, but this is just one. It should be very exciting. Milliken Field, I'm sure anyone who's been following this over the last year plus, there was a big field study funded and reviewed. And conversations continue. That there's a little more money needed to continue those conversations, perhaps do some more review and design, so that come spring there'll be a big, more robust conversation about next steps.
Yeah, the advisory was supported keeping the process going so that when the discussion of substantial renovations and improvements comes along, that we're working with good and reliable information. It's just keeps the process moving, and it'll make the considerations later on a little bit more objective if we've got good drawings and all the alternatives laid out and things like that. So we were for it ultimately.
The next one is repairs specifically for Beechwood. There's some more work that needs to be done out there. In fact, there's an ongoing conversation about replacing the entire playground. That will continue into the spring. So this is money that's available if it's needed to do some repairs just to that equipment over the winter and spring. And I'm not sure if that'll be necessary, but it's good to have it just in case.
Yeah, it's important to remember that, and I'd say this subject to correction by both of you, but if we don't appropriate the money, it's not there to use.
Correct.
And you have to go look at emergency funds and other places. But appropriating money doesn't necessarily, as you said earlier, about, it becomes free cash if we don't use it. Right. So the advisory committee agreed that having that money available so that, if something needed to be done at the Beechwood Playground, it wouldn't be out of commission for some length of time. It could just be funded up and fixed. So
the last project on this list is the Milliken Field Restroom Concession Stand. There's been conversations about that going on for a while. It's been very complex. It's too big for us to build ourselves. It's been too small for anyone to bid on in a reasonable way. That said, I think we finally have a path that's going to get us here. This is the last bit of money that will hopefully cover the expense, and we'll be in good shape. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be a new number 13 in here, and that will be for the Main Street water main replacement that took place last month. So that's Article 5, recommended unanimously by the Water Commission, the Advisory Committee, the Select Board. There were a couple of abstentions on a couple of the projects, the school bus and the Milliken Field study by Captital, but otherwise it was all unanimous. Nobody voted no on anything here. CPC, there's actually only one of these will be going forward, and even though you'll see 3 in the warrant, the only one that's going to be voted on is the library amphitheater, and that's $125,000. Advisory will get that at its next meeting, and Select Board will get that to vote on. But there's only one project being recommended for the fall, and that is the library amphitheater project. It's great. Again, you can find links, and we can go to the library's website, I think, for more information. All right. Okay, we did Article 6.
We're all good.
All right, let's move right on. All right. Article 7. Article 7 is a little unusual. We have a number of revolving funds. This will create a new one. And do you want to explain, Jennifer, what a revolving fund does?
Sure, absolutely. So we have a revolving fund is when we take in money for a specific purpose, and that specific purpose supports the same specific purpose. So the money comes in and then the money goes out. And in this case, it's money from vaccinations. So we take money in from vaccinations and then we buy more and we continue that program. It's really programmatic, if you want to call it that. And so what town meeting really does is sets an expenditure limit every year on what you can expend out of that fund, but we don't expend more than the revenue comes in. It is, per the Department of Revenue.
And in this case, the town's always done flu clinics. Obviously, we've done COVID clinics, and the reimbursement process is getting far more complicated. And as I understand it, it might make the accounting process a little bit easier to keep it in one place because the receipts don't always match the fiscal year when they come back in. Exactly. And to have it in a revolving fund, you don't have to worry about that.
Exactly.
So much.
And if during the year, if any time we have to increase the expense limit, we can just go to the Select Board, and we have a bylaw, and then we can increase it in the middle of the fiscal year.
So it allows us to be a little more nimble if there was some kind of a need for an enhanced vaccination program. So that's Article 7, and that was recommended unanimously by the Board of Public Health, as well as the Advisory Committee and Select Board. Now, Article 8, so I'm sure folks have seen that there was a major national settlement. The Massachusetts Attorney General's Office was a lead player in that regarding opioids and all of the addiction issues that revolved around the OxyContin and all of that challenge. So Cohasset is getting money over the next 20 years. It needs to be spent in a very targeted way. It's broad, but targeted towards like issues that involve safe harbor or anti-drug coalition and things like that. So we'd like to be able to take that money and put it right into a fund, and we hoped that by the time we got to town meeting that would be ready. It sounds like it may not be. We'll know for sure when we see everyone in person on the 12th. So this may not be ready, so this may end up being postponed because we need a vehicle that the state has approved for us to put this money right in. Otherwise, it just runs up in the general budget, I think.
Exactly, right. The legislature's still discussing on how to handle this, and DOR will come out with an informational guideline. But right now, it's general fund revenue per the DOR. But as you said, we need it for targeted purposes. So when it goes in the general fund, it's difficult to do that. So they're still working out the specifics.
So it's also possible by the time town meeting comes in a couple of weeks that we'll have come up with an alternative solution. We'll have to, again, this is in progress. But it's important, so everyone knows we're going to be getting this money. It's not a lot of money every year. That said, it is money that's going to help with services to avoid addiction and bad behavior. Article 9 may seem a little unusual. So there's a
Article
clock.
9 is awesome. I love Article 9.
So Article 9 involves getting an easement from the First Parish Church to access the town clock. The clock that sits, so the First Parish Church is right there on the common, was town hall for a couple hundred years until the building was built across the street in 1850, in the 1850s. In 1865, I believe it is, or 1864, the town bought a clock and put it in the clock tower, because the town hall didn't have a clock tower, put it in the clock tower over the First Parish Church. So it's owned by the town, and it's been there since the 1860s. It needs to be repaired. As it turns out, we don't have a formal access easement to get up into the tower. We go anyway, but our attorney said, well, you might want to really have something official. So the church has no problem with that. This will actually enable that to happen.
Yeah, and it's literally an easement that goes up a ladder, and if there's a more fun easement than that, I don't know what it is. But the clock has, in addition to being a useful way to tell what time it is an historical, it's a Howard clock, I think?
Again, all on the website, you can find this
Yeah,
information. It is a historic clock.
Yeah, and it's well worth maintaining. It needs maintenance, and I think it was a nice catch to say, not that the people at First Parish aren't, great and would let the town in there anyhow, but formalizing that relationship is just as easy as voting yes on this article, which we recommended. So
Okay. So the Article 9 recommended approval by a vote of unanimous votes of both the Select Board and the Advisory Committee. That's to get that easement for the clock. Article 10 are some definitional changes to the wetlands protection bylaws in resource areas. There's a riverfront area and a vernal pool. I'm not going to get into the details of this. That said, that it was well discussed, and the Commission believes that these are areas that need clarification. This just, I think, as I understand it, and as it's been publicly explained, it just brings it a little tighter into conformance with state law. So there they are.
the Conservation Commission put a lot of time into this. The Advisory Committee has a liaison to the Conservation Commission who reported back to us that their work was thorough. There was no objection raised to the Advisory Committee when we were talking about it. There was nothing that any member of the public raised as a matter to be, further debated. I don't know whether the Concom had any discussion before it, but we're inclined to defer to the Conservation Commission on the regulations under the statutes that they are responsible for implementing. And as I said, we had a capable liaison who recommended it as well, so we were unanimously in support. Yeah, the fact that there are 9 of us on the advisory committee, and a lot of these recommendations are 8-0 or 7-0. This just means somebody wasn't able to make it to the meeting that night. If somebody voted no or abstained, that would be noted. But just because it's not the full number, isn't it? There's no negative inference from that. So
thank you for mentioning that. I should have mentioned that earlier. So, and again, the other two boards, Conservation and Select Board, also unanimously recommended this to town meeting. Article 11, public safety communication towers. As I mentioned earlier about the wetland assessment. So the town's been seeking a way to improve cell coverage, wireless coverage on the north side of town. It's very difficult and it becomes very problematic for public safety purposes. I dropped a call today as I was driving along there, and that happens all the time. The town has installed a call box at Rocky Beach. So if anyone's down there now, there's an emergency call box. That's a satellite phone and it's solar powered. So whether there's power failures or not, there's at least something there now. And because it's not as lifeguarded beach, it's used a lot more than it used to be. So anyone in that area in an emergency could come down and get a direct access to the emergency call center from that location. That said, that's an emergency on-site supplement. There's an old. The town's been working with the cell carriers for a while, our public safety people in particular, and our IT staff, to find locations that might help improve coverage. And there's been some focus on Wheelwright Park, and there's some areas that are pretty buried in there.
Yes.
And there's a historic old radar testing tower that's in there too. It's been there for years. Doesn't do anything. So it's not quite right there, but it's in that same general area. And this article will allow the town to continue that process to the point. If we get this site set in Wheelwright, it's about 2.5 acres. And again, it doesn't need all of that. That's just a protection buffer zone because you have to have room around it in case the tower falls. The article will allow the town to go through this process, which is under Article 97, I think, which is a petition to the state. And I'm not going to try to play town council on this. A lot of work's being done. We have to do a little swap with some other land. The town owns other land that can be used. If it turns out that this is dedicated parking land, we have to swap it out. There's a couple of other acres in another location we could flip to make it parkland. And again, it really won't eliminate the use of it'll settle in nicely to the park. There'll be a lot more public conversations about it, but this is the next step that's required for us to get any further. And again, that whole area is a dead zone a lot of times. So we're trying to give proactive opportunities for the residents to find a way to make it safer.
Yeah, the advisory understood that there's a public safety dimension and that it won't materially interfere with any recreational use of the park or natural beauty of the park or anything else. There's another old tower in that general vicinity, and I know it's hard to get to. It's pretty overgrown and not where the main trails are. So
that's one of the challenges with siting it there too, is how do we get there, right? So that's something that's being explored. There's a lot of conversations happening. So this approves a process to go forward. If it doesn't make sense, then we won't go forward. And eventually town meeting would also have to approve any lease anyway. So if there's actually a tower constructed, there would have to be an approval of a lease. But this allows for that conversation to go about dedicating that piece of land forward. That's Article 11. Article 12. The town had negotiated a new agreement with the police units, both the superior officers and the patrol sergeants. And part of the agreement we reached was to leave the civil service system. The civil service system once was the way everything worked. Unfortunately, it's become somewhat less functional over time. A lot of communities have left civil service. In fact, if anyone's read recent stories, their entire testing process was ruled discriminatory. So right now they can't even process new hires, much less promotions. Or I should say it's promotion. The promotional exams were all invalidated, which is problematic, right? So we have no control over that, no input, no nothing. In a system that we'd run ourselves, we'd still have a tested and it would still be merit-based and skill-based. The town would also then be able to recruit differently and really target the needs of Cohasset. Again, other communities have done this too. And the police department, the unions agreed. So they're in support. It's going to be a long process. That said, this authorizes the select board to file a home rule petition to start that process. The town went into civil service. I have this information back in the 20s, and town meeting approved it. So we have to go out the same way we came in. So town meeting has to approve the removal, so that's Article 12.
from the point of view of the advisory committee, it was agreed to by the chief. It was agreed to by the unions. That covers everybody in the department, and that the key benefit for the town will be streamlining the hiring process, which is not easy to find highly qualified candidates, and as far as we know, it is the trend. So particularly for a town our size, it's better to be out, and where there's no dispute among the people most directly affected, we were very comfortable recommending it be approved.
There'll be more information on the website about that, and if anyone has any questions, again, of this discussion at some of the meetings. That's Article 12, recommending unanimously by the Select Board and the Advisory Committee. Article 13 approves contract extensions for cell antennas. There's antennas on water property. It's the tanks, and the water department gets revenue for that. It also improves cell service because those are high points in town. So this would just allow an extension of those leases. I think it's for another decade plus. This was done in the past, so it just needs to get renewed.
It fell into the category of no-brainer for advisory. The tanks are there anyhow. Putting a revenue-producing cell equipment on it is good for everybody, and I live on the hillside, so I can use my cell phone in my yard. So it's
It's a win-win.
yeah, win-win. That I remember when they went in, it was a big improvement. So very good idea.
And those are recommended unanimously by the Water Commission, Advisory, and Select Board. The last two articles, which we're not really going to get into today, are citizens' petitions. The first one, Article 14, is a petition to fund feasibility studies and plans to construct sidewalks on King Street and a portion of pond that connects from King Street to 3A and then links across over towards the high school and middle school. That's on the warrant. And then Article 15 is the harbor navigation bylaw. Select Board had a big public meeting about that, and this would enact a bylaw. The proposed bylaw is actually in the warrant. And again, I think folks can watch the Select Board meeting the other night. That was all recorded if they want to learn more about the bylaw and what it's about. So that is the warrant for special town meeting, December 12th. Final comments?
We expect a pretty efficient town. Special town meetings tend to be housekeeping items and more limited in scope than annual town meeting. I'm not sure I agree with the opinion that there are things that should not be part of special town meeting. It's a duly noticed meeting, and anything that can be in front of town meeting can be in front of a special town meeting. But this is a good focused warrant. It's things we have to do to run a municipality. Hopefully we get a quorum quickly, that people exercise their civil duty and come on up and help the town get through what it needs to get through.
So
That's all I had. I'm looking forward to it.
So December 12th, it's Monday, December 12th, 7 p.m. at the high school, at the gym in the rear of the building. Need everyone to come out, please. It shouldn't take a terribly long time. Really important items on here. And we need a minimum number of people, too.
Yes.
So the quorum is 100. And there's been some meetings where we've taken longer to get to quorum than to conduct the actual meeting. I don't think that'll be the case this time.
The last special town meeting before COVID, it took longer to get a quorum than it took to do the business of the meeting. It was about 20 minutes to get a quorum, and we were out of there by half past. So
Again, if you see in the back, there's childcare options. It'll be right here in the building. So if you need to keep your kids entertained, younger kids entertained while you're at the meeting, there'll be a program run by Rec right here in the building, so you can look at that. Please come out. It's really important. Town meeting is the ultimate exercise in local democracy. It's the community's running itself, right? It's the community's expressing its laws, its funding, its policies, and that's all of which are covered by this small but very important warrant. Thank you for joining us, Jennifer.
Well, thank you for having me. I look forward to meeting everyone at town meeting, and it's my first town meeting, so I find it very exciting, and thank you.
Jennifer's just joined the town as our finance director and town account, so very excited. We'll look forward to seeing you there. And Rob, thank you again, chair of the advisory committee. For all of us here talking about the warrant and everyone involved in making the government go, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you December 12th, special town meeting. Thanks for joining us.
thank you.
Thank you.